So how do you approach gaps? If you identify a gap, do you approach it by addressing the weakness, or do you approach it by doubling down on the strength? I think this is where cycling specific training and triathlon maybe diverge, because with cyclists, you identify a weakness. Okay, I'm not very good at climbing, and a strength, I'm a super fast finisher. So you double down, you put all your chips into the I'm a fast finisher bucket. And now you become an out and out sprinter. But if the terrain doesn't suit for today, you just write that race off and you go, okay, well, I'm not going to win that race. I sit up and I finish in the gruppetto for today. That's not quite the same for triathlon, I think.
I would say it is. I wouldn't say there any difference, because I think this comes down more to the view, or let's say how flexible you also think that physiology is as well. For me, I would say that what I would be focusing on, whether that's strength or weakness, comes down rather more to where we think there is the most to be gained. Because again, we are investing time, we're investing hours, we're investing resources into improve. And for example, if I identified that investing the same amount of time into improving that weakness versus trying to improve a strength, and we think that actually there are much more likelihood that we will improve here by working on that weakness there. I would rather focus on that weakness and then improve that first, and then again it becomes a new assessment. What are now the gaps? Because I don't think that you can do like a gap analysis like once a year. You need to, all these tools, you need to keep them updated. It's like accounting of a business. You need to keep track of what is changing, how is the response, business to the market. In sports, how do you respond to the training stimulus? To see basically that you always are investing your time and resources where you're getting the most out of it. Because I think that it's, if you just double down on for example, just maintaining or trying to improve a strength, for example, you potentially lose out on quite a lot of improvements, in the same way that if you just focus on a weakness, improving a weakness, and you don't understand whether that is really the best place to invest your time and resources, you might also, yes, you might improve a little bit, but you would be better off focusing on something completely different. So again, this is where I have a more holistic approach about it, and it's more about where do we see the largest return on investment. It is really as simple as that, how say philosophically speaking, or let's say strategically speaking. But of course, the difficulty is understanding how to improve. What tactics do you use? What tools do you use in order to improve that? That's where you start to get more into the nitty-gritty details, and you really have to be precise on what you do. So I personally prefer much more having a holistic approach, and I don't have a determination of what and how. It comes more down to where do we think is the most to be improved, compared when we look at the gap. And then it's more about figuring out how do we improve that. And sometimes, so sometimes you have past experience with addressing it. Other times you just see that here there are potentially a big gain to be made, and this is where you just have to learn new skills. But that's the goal of a coach anyway, or a mentor anyway, is that we are the ones that are supporting the person that is executing, so that person can have full focus on executing, while we look at, okay, how can we improve the execution?
So let's zoom into a micro block now. We talked kind of broad strokes about the macro block. Into the micro block, a lot of cyclists in World Tour land, reverse periodization has got quite popular at the moment, where the off season is looking like a 4-month block, where there's testing at the beginning of block 1, and block 1 focuses on sprinting, and then there's retesting of sprinting in the decompression week at the end of the 4th week. Then it moves on to VO2 max with the same formula, testing at the start and testing at the end for 4 weeks, then into threshold, and then into endurance, which is the opposite to how we worked for a long, long time. But I chatted to the kid who won Barcelona and Mallorca this year, Yuri Kulin, and Yuri doesn't seem to follow any structure like this. He kind of stays on all year round. But it was interesting to me how he structured his week, where he has full VO2 max days. So he'll have a Tuesday where his swim, his bike, and his run are all VO2 max sessions that day. And for me, that was just horrific sound, and I couldn't get my head around how you get out of bed that morning knowing you've 3 VO2 max sessions to do that day. What's your philosophy on that microstructure? How do you approach it?
Again, so there's one philosophical part of it, and then there, of course, is the let's say the practical part of it. The philosophical part of it is more what you think is needed. What do you think is needed for a microstructure to be as to achieve as high as possible quality in that microstructure? And by quality, I'm not talking about intensity. I'm talking about purely like progress, whether that is low intensity, medium intensity, high intensity. Because for me, like quality and intensity are two different things, because you want to have the maximum quality both in your low intensity sessions, your medium intensity session, and your high intensity sessions. Put it a little bit bluntly, like is your low intensity ride a low quality ride? Does it what are you doing? And like are you mindless about your, or actually are you mindful about what you also do in your low intensity sessions? But when it comes to microstructure, like I think that there is a lot of value in, for example, repeating patterns. Simply because if you have a mindful